All right, we are live. It is January 15th. It's our second program of the year. Happy New Year for those who we have not talked to already and wish you the best in 2025. We have a great program today with a great guest. And before we get rolling, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some music.
In the Southland, there's a city way down on the river where the folks are very pretty and everyone delivers. They got music playing all the time. Starts in the daylight and go all through the night. And when you hear that music playing, I'm going to tell you that you feel all right. So get somebody, come on down. Bring your paintbrush, painting the town. There's gonna be something going down. See you down in New Orleans.
All right. Thank you, Johnny.
How you doing
You're
today?
you're always coming up with new tunes, man. That library of yours is large.
Well, that's the city of my birth. You know, my city of my birth is the city of New Orleans. We had a tough time there during Mardi Gras. And, there's a ceasefire being done now in the Middle East, and that's news to my ears. And elect President Trump has already said it's because he's becoming president that we have a ceasefire now. So, so we have a ceasefire going on there to get rid of some of that stuff. We still have the stuff that's going on in Ukraine that I really keep up with. Because I believe that we are, indirectly at war. Being an old veteran myself, I think we're
Sure.
indirectly at war. And Andres, I've been reading a lot about the impact of the tariffs on China and China's reaction and all the different states that's organizing under the BRICS pact and what impact would that have on job creation in America and all of the
Hmm.
conflicts, if you will, about technology. I saw that yesterday America shut off all of the shipping of certain kinds of chips to China. So it's a different kind of world. And if you think back, I was a professor in Japan for 14 summers. I don't know if you knew that.
Hmm.
But we did the same thing with Japan. We were very, very competitive with Japan in terms of the technology, and so all of those things can relate to how Americans do in the future. And I guess the big theoretical, as a professor type, to what extent is the world shifting where China would be the center of everything, and America is not. And I think we always have to look at that in terms of technology, in terms of markets and those kind of things. So I've been doing a lot of reading on uh, on that and just looking at from the professor's point of view, if I'm in a discussion, what does it really mean with the changing economic nature, if you will, of the world. I like to go back to the physiocrats who believed it wasn't labor that was important, but it was the minerals and everything came from the soil and everything came from
Hmm.
earth. On the job creation side, I think that America is doing good. I think it is the job creation side is there, but the threat of the loss of jobs, the actual threat of the loss of jobs, and also the dependence on the stock market. So if you look at China, only about 20% of their people are in the stock market. So if they have a hiccup, the stock market won't hiccup. In America, it's with everybody investing in the 401ks and stuff, it's just 70%. So if the stock market has a hiccup, our entire economy would have a hiccup.
Hmm.
So everything is pretty wild, but there's nothing about being in equilibrium in anything.
Hmm. I was
And
gonna I was gonna ask you something else, Johnny, before we get rolling here. Any thoughts on the fires going on in LA and the impact of that to the insurance industry and the overall thought of how fragile our, disaster response mechanisms are and
I do, having been a big consultant for a major insurance company for 22 years, and I think this is what happened. I think there was a lot of underbrush that was developing in California that they didn't clean out. I think the
Mm-hmm.
insurance for a lot of those houses went up to $1 million, and I would bet that a lot of them dropped their insurance. That would be my guess. And I think it was California's choice whether they put the money on whatever the homelessness or whatever, and deal with the underbrush. One of the things
Mm-hmm.
about fires is, and then of course I live in a place in Austin that's all woods, in great, there's just woods everywhere. But one of the things about fires is that it needs underbrush to really get going. And I think the underbrush
Content.
started having a party. And I think I mean, Chicago burned down in the early days, and a lot of cities have burned down. But this is what I think. I think
Mm-hmm.
it would be rebuilt. It's too pretty not to. My guess is that a lot of people did not have insurance because it was too high. Insurance have something they call exposure management. Okay. So why would you write a lot of insurance on the coast of Louisiana when there's a storms every month, right? I don't know, but my guess would be that it would be a lot of people without insurance. It is very tragic, but it shows you the interaction of um, of Mother Nature, right? And I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that the underbrush just had a party. And I do believe that what I've read is that a lot of times they could not get the water to the that was necessary, and I think all of that is on the city. And you ask what were they doing with the money that they should have done, to stop the fires. And I think that California has always been very resilient. I think they'll come back strong. It's a gorgeous place. It's going to be just like in southern Louisiana. We have a storm, we just rebuild and wait for the next one because it's just too pretty. But to watch the number of houses, it's like being alive when Chicago burned down,
Mm-hmm.
and etc. So I think it's one of the things that it's very tragic. There's nothing you can do but watch. You just need to get out of there. But my question is this: how much insurance was involved, and how many people had
Mm-hmm.
dropped their insurance?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a great friend who has a $50 million home there.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that he dropped his insurance because it went up to $1 million because the underbrush was not cleaned out by the city.
Mm-hmm.
And right now he's on the East Coast now. He has a house also on the East Coast, and so he does not have any insurance on a $50 million home, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Llewellyn?
Stage of transition and of great indecision because nobody is sure what the new government is going to do in the US, and it affects the entire world. I think Johnny is right that maybe we have more problem at the moment with Russia than we do with China. Long term, we've got to do something to get us off the idea that there's an inevitability of clash with China. I also think that at some point demographics come into play. There are a billion Chinese, but there are 1.4 billion Indians. I think at some point demographics count, at least if you're raising an infantry-based army, demographics become very important. I think we need to get out of our thinking the inevitability of clash, or we'll get clash, and a high chance that the world we have known and that we think is worthwhile and certainly would appear to be the best world we've been able to construct in all of human history, in that more people live better than they ever have at any time, will be endangered. There's some very dangerous senses of inevitability. Inevitability tends to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is really very important to change the underlying philosophy that keeps us in the state that we have to have an enemy, that it's inevitable. We don't have to have an enemy and it's not inevitable. But a lot of thinking has to change in a lot of places. There's great uncertainty about the incoming administration, largely because it has done something no administration has ever had the tools to do, all the inclination, and that is it fired off all these declarations of what they're going to do. They're going to force coal plants to stay online. Today, I heard coal operators saying that's not a solution to anything. Some of the coal plants we want to take offline for good and sufficient reason. One operator said that their coal plants had become de facto load following rather than base plants, and there would be nothing saved in keeping them on, etc. That's one little bit of a very complex world in which, through Truth Social and X, all kinds of contradictory and inflammatory statements have been made, from which some kind of cohesive national project of governance has to emerge. The president-elect Donald Trump has told us, I think, that there are 20 things he's going to do on day one. Nobody can do 20 things on day one. So a lot of that's going to fall by the wayside. Some of the things are duplicative. For example, setting up a collection agency to do what the Customs and Excise Department already does, which is collect tariffs. Why would you have two agencies collecting tariffs? Then you've got this strange Elon Musk shadow government with a department that isn't a department because it hasn't been formally created. How will it interface with other things? Again, you have duplication. Many of the roles assigned to the Department of Government Efficiency are in fact roles normally performed by the Office of Management and Budget. Will Elon Musk have authority over the Office of Management and Budget? Will he just duplicate it and have his own government within the government? There are a lot of issues that are open. And they're very, very confusing, and they have people very hesitant about the future. This is not a matter of idealism. This is a matter of simple governance of national cohesion that is necessary. You can't have two departments doing everything. You have an energy secretary, and then you have a super secretary over him who will be the secretary of the Interior with authority over the Department of Energy. None of this has ever happened before. There's no management structure here that is logical, and so much has to be resolved very quickly if we're going to continue on a steady path forward and hopefully upward.
Well, just to remind everybody that I just got back from CES last week, Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and while the world seems to be going a million miles an hour in all kinds of directions, about 150,000 high-tech folks gather there. And the major keynote was Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, who happened to announce many things. And he also announced the very first personal supercomputer for $3,000, which will be a one-of-a-kind supercomputer that I'm sure our guest and her friends in the world are going to use to revolutionize how AI happens to improve our lives. Autonomous vehicles were the number one theme. Chinese made everything, was everywhere, robots, and all kinds of derivatives of that, including the notion of augmented reality and virtual reality on everything, and new kinds of gaming products. So it seems to me like the Gen Zs and the alphas are going to take over the world. And so we have a great guest today that will kind of help us navigate how we get there. So let me remind you all, we have had the pleasure of working with Ahna Boley. She was with us at the Digital 360 Summit. She is the CEO of AA Labs, and she has a unique experience as what I would call the next generation executive. She has been doing a lot of development of groundbreaking virtual environments that deliver measurable results by turning passive audiences into active participants. Social media and the whole virtual world is really taking over. We're, I think, at a crossroads. And Anna is one of those people that is an actor, driver, leader of that transformation that many are not talking about, but I think it's fundamental to where we're heading, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship and business and capitalism that Johnny likes so much. Anna, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I enjoyed your initial takes on where the world is at today. I follow pretty much everything you guys are saying. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it just keeps seeming like the world gets more and more complicated every day with either a new technology or a new opinion or something forming. So we'll never solve all the world's problems, but we can certainly try in this hour here as much as possible.
So
And I
tell
will
us,
just quickly clarify, I'm the Chief
Yeah.
Experience Officer, not Executive Officer. So
that that's right. You're absolutely right. I switched that in my mind as the
no worries.
ADD. So tell us about AA Labs, and what do you guys do, and what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, so AA Labs, we're an immersive technology company. Our background has been in live events, and we started that, back in 2013. But there was always a component missing when it comes to live events and experiences. Is what is that digital component? It's never about the 500 people in the room. It's about the 5 million at home that you're trying to reach, right? And how are we doing that today? Well, Zoom, obviously, during the pandemic, took a huge jump. It kind of brought everybody up to this idea of, okay, this is how we're going to communicate online. My grandmother can do it, my mom can do it, everyone understands Zoom. But if you think about it, when you're doing a live event or an experience, we're in digital cubicles right now. Like, I can't really do much in this meeting other than talk to you guys. If I want to have a quick side note with John, the only way I can do it is type to him or say it out loud, and then we all hear each other, right? And so this is effective for quick conversations group wide, but it's not effective for how we really need to connect humanly with each other. And that's what we've built as a company, is this idea of how do you make our online experience more immersive and actually create engagement? Because if you're not engaging, you're not actually learning the information that's being presented to you. I can sit here and multitask, which 92% of us are actually doing. And then, it's the world's biggest known secret, right? That we're all multitasking. And so how do you turn an audience like this into more engagement? And that's what we're trying to do. Because if you're engaging, you're learning. And if you're learning, then you're able to actually convert that person for whether it's monetization needs as a business or actually learning something in education to make yourself better and to, push you forward in society. So that's kind of the ethos of what we're trying to do here at AA Labs.
So tell us real quick, instead of the one or two key customers or one or two key projects, and how what you guys are doing, it made an impact.
Yeah, so think of companies that have a community already. YouTube is a great one. They have a creators, thousands of them that they are trying to promote content on YouTube. But YouTube also wants them to make better content, right? Be able to collaborate with other people. So why not get a group of them together online to actually get to meet each other in a safe space, maybe learn how an algorithm changes, bring in special speakers, have the creators tell about their own experience. And so we created with them this online virtual collaboration zone where they could have these weekly, monthly, sessions around topics where everyone could get to meet each other and then be able to make better content. Because the better the content is, the more viewers you get, the more people subscribe, the more YouTube ends up making in the long run from ad sales and from other things, right? And so our platform gave them a visual way to feel like they're in the same room, connect together, break off into sidebar conversations, move around the room. So instead of, being here and listening, we could actually have them move their circle to the left side of the room if they agreed, or move it to the right side of the room if they disagreed. So now they're actively engaged in the conversations versus just being a passive audience. So with them, we were able to increase attendance at their events over 15x from when they were using Meets. And then we were also able to show what people were interested in the space through the analytics on the back end, which you don't get on like a platform like this, right? There's nothing to click on. But in my world, I can make this A back here clickable, which would open up maybe my website or a fun fact that you need to know about me. And then I track that, and then I can tell you how many people actually clicked on it so that I can engage that and turn it into how maybe in the future we can gear our content towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like one of the great questions of science. Back in the 1700s, when psychology separated, or sociology separated from psychology, and said that how we act is not a function of our psychological makeup, but rather the function of the networks of people that we have based on positive and negative sanctions. So in other words, I stay in line is still being questioned academically of order. Why aren't we all just shooting each other if we don't have an order? Of course, and then Auguste Comte separated psychology from sociology and said, well, humans are social and they must have the human interaction.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now, and I think that all of this comes from the old sociology of Auguste Comte and networking and the importance of human interaction, not the new sociology of who's being offended and et cetera. So my question is this: given that the internet is here, given that the Internet of Things is here, and given that when we do studies, I mean, people are isolating themselves, not in just 1 and 2 numbers. And of course, what the internet tried to do, it takes the analog of what Comte tried to do and the old networking, because sociology did all the networking theory from who talked about how networks, show me your network and I'll show you your future. So how do you take that electronic internet, and create the analog of a real experience for a person in person, who, by the way, have never done anything but play games, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
who have never done anything but having meetings on Zoom, and by the way, who feel very, very uncomfortable with other people. I
Yeah.
mean, so I would love to know how you're tackling this old theoretical question of Auguste Comte, that's COMTE, if you want to read about it. And I know you heard my guitar playing. Before you send me a contract to go live in your games, can you answer that question first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to how do you integrate more human-like behavior into what you're creating online. So we're not meant to stare at ourselves. I don't know if you guys have in this entire meeting looked at me or each other, but I find myself constantly looking at myself, and I'm like, okay, stop looking at me, focus on other people, because we're not meant to have ourselves right there, right? And so, how do you still give people this idea that you're part of a community without having to force everybody to uh, you know, be this big necessarily. And do you mind if I share my screen? Is that okay with y'all?
Go ahead, go ahead.
That's fine with me.
All right, great. So our worlds that we're creating are actually immersive backgrounds, right? And so we create this idea of a 3D world with a 2D interface for easy usage. Anybody who's grown up playing video games, we talk a lot with millennials about Club Penguin or any basic games. You kind of get this idea that, okay, I want to be in a different world, something that's going to grab my attention. So when I'm in my space, I can actually move around with my circle.
Mm-hmm.
But notice
Mm-hmm.
that my circle's not overtaking the entire world. I could be in here with 10 other people. I can see them, see what's going on, and it's not just about me and everything, about my background and what I have.
Mm.
um it's also about how do you create moments of kismet or connection, right? So let me just quickly jump to one of our rooms here. Let's go to our breakout room. So, in a room such as this, it's set up very fun. Maybe we're networking. Each table is a different topic number potentially that you can move around to. So maybe I'm over here at table number 2, and I'm talking with you, Llewellyn, and we're going on about energy and what the next big thing is going to be in energy. But I noticed that there's a bunch of people down at table 5. Well, why don't I just move over to table 5 and now have a separate conversation about maybe world politics? And so I can move and have proximity audio, which you can do in real life. Like at Andres at CES, you can walk over to this table, say hi to them, what's their technology. You can't do that on the normal platforms that we have right now. And so
Mhm.
by creating a space that allows you to naturally move around and giving you the user choice, you're now creating that idea of bringing that human-like behavior that we're used to seeing in the networking room online that you haven't really been seeing up until this point.
So Anna, what you're saying is that if I'm at work, I'm at home, I might need to walk down the hall and see my friend.
Yep.
I might need to walk to the water fountain and have a conversation with my friend.
Mhm.
And I always said, Anna, during the pandemic, as a professor at UT, I would love to have an image that was my classroom. So I could literally walk through the classroom. I needed a studio at home, I used to tell
Mm-hmm.
UD, so that I can create what I would usually do. So I would walk through the classroom, and I would I ask people what they're reading, and walk through the classroom and pick on students, have private conversations with students. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, look,
Mm-hmm.
how can you be at work at Texas State? Okay, I'm at
Mm-hmm.
home, but let me walk down the hallway and see Andreas. That's what you're doing?
Yeah, you could use it as a digital office if you wanted.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Whatever it is. Yes.
yeah, our solution it does work for that, and I think it's great for those both synchronous and asynchronous moments. Not everyone wants to always be logged into a site though, so I think that there is a use for it for that. What we're really focusing on is key moments in your business that you want those engagement points, whether it's your actual class, so that's a key tentpole moment. It could be a talk, right? A digital roundtable. Andres could be hosted in here, and having those moments that are going to drive people to the space. And if they want to stay longer and have that natural conversation, or they want to set office hours, they could totally do that. And we find most people need a reason to come into the digital world versus like, oh, I'm just going to be hanging around, because our focus is really B2B to C. It's not directly to consumers, with
Mhm.
what we're our current solution.
So Anna, let me just ask this question though.
Yeah.
But still, since we are a social person, is our new sociability now the room on the screen? Or
It
do
could
we
be.
do and let me go back in terms of that is if you were in my class and we were talking about business enterprise, we were talking
Hmm.
about the farmers who worked all in isolation, but on Saturday night, right, went to the barn and everybody had a dance. All right. So
Yep.
this is not the first time we have seen the relationship between being alone and wanting to belong as humans.
Yeah.
So whether it's the and all of the good research is what happened to American towns, right, where everybody went to town on Saturday, but Monday through Friday worked like hell, but they
Hmm.
didn't see anybody. So my question is this: are we still though? Is this the new dance hall?
It
Mm.
definitely could be, and I love that idea. I mean, we've had people talk about, could I use this for like my Dungeons and Dragons group, right? Because we could have a really cool immersive background that looks like the map of the D&D game that we want to play. We could embed things. You'll notice that I can click here to actually open things up. So now there's moments of exploration, whether you wanted to make this a digital escape room, you could, or whether you want to gather feedback directly from somebody else. We're embedding different elements into the site. So it's not just a flat website. You're actually being able to get information back from your users. And so, yes, you could definitely host something in here that makes people feel less alone, and to come to an event every Friday night. Maybe it's your virtual happy hour, right? Where everyone has a drink at their home. They come in here, how'd the day go? And they're able to kind of move around the room. But I want to be clear that we're not trying to change real life. Real life is amazing. And we want people to still connect together. But there are times where you can't. And that's where a platform like this comes into play.
Yeah, let me just say this before. If you go back and look at the history of social thought, and people talked about, for example, when market economists came in and switched from hunting and gathering, Marx talked about the alienation of people from themselves, the means of production, and from other people. And that alienation revolved around the fact that you were not social, That is, you were separated literally by yourself. And then Ibn Khaldun, who was writing in the 15th century, also addressed the problem of networking and being alone. So my question is, although it doesn't take the place of human activity, certainly if I were doing research in this area, I would have to say that there is a place online that creates the analog of what we're accustomed to.
No, I agree 100%. And think of it too as like focus groups, right? So a lot of times historically, when you think of focus groups, you bring 10 people into a room, they mess with the product, whatever. And so a lot of companies are looking for ways to create that same experience, but not actually have to have people come to the space, right? Where a lot of people like to be remote, to your point. And so how do you get them out? Well, it's creating a space like this where you could set it up like a digital focus group, you know, would be a very interesting way of also using the platform, which we have done, right? And so it's anytime you want to get people together, you can use a space like this. And the backgrounds are just, we actually use AI for it. So we've taken hundreds of thousands of dollars that we spent on 3D modeling and, you know, spatial awareness and all of that. And we can now do that with AI to move us forward. So if you want to, you know, be on the moon in Paris, if you want to be on the beach, I can do that in a matter of seconds. And it also becomes brandable for brands as well, right? To have your products showcased within the space. And so, yes, it's very much about how do you bring people together and not have them, you know, live off on their own, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Llewellyn,
I didn't ask this question, but I spent a lot of time on Zoom.
come closer, come closer.
Webinars with television programs, with virtual press conferences, and yet there is this great separation. I know these people, I see them regularly, but I don't really. I know Johnny and Andres because I've been down and met them, but I wouldn't know them if I only saw them on the screen, and I might not know them well enough to recognize them in real life. There is always that degree of separation. I don't know if, as the play says, the play was Stockard Channing, whether it's 6 degrees. I think it's much closer to 40% of separation, 40 degrees of separation, because it is an artificial world. It is not the same as though the 4 of us were around a table. It's just not the same. And I wonder to what extent chasing it is worth it. Sometimes when we get technology, we want to replicate something we have, whereas we shouldn't be trying to do that. The technology should be used for some other more creative purpose. And you can see, let's take the automobile. The idea was really to replicate the horse. And even to this day, there's a tendency to put the engine in the front because the horse was in the front. But we did get away from realizing that the automobile was far superior and quite a different animal. I wonder to what extent with communications now, we're trying to replicate a human contact, and maybe we should forget about that and go to some other discrete use of these technologies. Are we going to alleviate loneliness? No, but we are going to help with it. I work with a disease called chronic fatigue syndrome, and the internet has been invaluable to these bedridden people who often for decades are cut off from the world, and it's been very valuable. It hasn't replicated human contact, it hasn't given them full active lives, but it's been a useful tool. It wasn't conceived for that purpose, but it's been very useful. I also look at new technologies, and they're often developed for a single mission, and they end up serving in another purpose quite so a much more important mission emerges. And I wonder at what stage of that evolution you're at, and whether this is really for company meetings, or is it for something quite different? Will it be more important in education than in corporation? The inclination would be to lean towards corporations because they have the resources to pay for it now, but maybe it's, I just wonder what its future is. Do we really need it in the normal sense. And then there's the interesting division between demand and need. There's a
Mhm.
demand for high-rise buildings in New York and a need for better sewers. And the two don't come together very easily. And it's always worth looking with new things, whether it's
Yeah.
whether there's demand there or whether there's need, and whether the effort should be to fulfill a need or satisfy a demand, and they aren't the same game.
Yeah, no, I think everything you're saying is questions that we've, as a company, have had to ask ourselves over the last year or two. We started building this product back in 2021, and we started first off with 3D worlds, right? What you would think of like what Meta's doing with their horizons and other things. And we quickly realized that the 3D world is a nice to have, but it's not a need because people are not always gamers. They have a hard time moving around. They got stuck in walls, like they would move their avatar, they couldn't get out of the corner, right? And so what we took a step back is, okay, what are we actually trying to solve for? And for us, it was engagement, because people aren't engaging online. They're listening, but they're being very passive. And there was a study done by, I believe it was Nielsen, that 90% of people are actually passive online, and only about 10% who are in a room are actually actively engaging. So how can you just slightly shift those numbers to reduce the passive and make more people active? Because if I'm actively engaging, I'm going to actually learn it and be able to then go take that information to do better in my life, like I mentioned earlier. And so one thing I know, that why I think this is a need and not just like a, are we building the wrong thing, is the idea of globalization. People are all around the world right now. I can't always get to Australia, to meet somebody because it's time, it's money, it's, scheduling, right? And so having a space like this that allows us to collaborate effectively and more excitingly is going to get us to maybe get to our answers faster. And it's also going to let me reach different people that I wouldn't normally get to reach, and also save money in the long run. We've also looked at which industries would benefit best from this. And to your point, education is one that we are working with, as like, how do we maybe make this a virtual classroom? Like John mentioned, if he had this with his students, it's hard to sometimes break into that strict pedagogy and change people's minds about how to maybe try something differently. And so the areas that we're able to do case studies have been a lot of like marketing teams or design related or tech related companies, because they understand kind of what we're doing. And by showing people use cases, now they go, oh, I can see how I can now use it for education or for focus groups. And so we've had to kind of see who had the money first, to your point about corporate, and be able to test it with them to now go to other groups and say, here's why it's valuable and here's the data that we can show you, to change their minds to then slightly shift how they are going to do something in the future. As we all know, educating people on a new technology is one of the hardest things for you to do. You got to show me why it's valuable. How long is it going to take me to learn? There's a lot of friction there. And so that's definitely been what we've been doing for the last year or so, is that education and turning that into, people more interested to actually purchase and use it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So did that answer your question? I think it kind of hit some of the topics.
Well, I think it's very interesting. I don't know. I'm interested in how people learn and what they retain. As I do broadcasting and I write, I can tell you that broadcasting has an overnight impact and very little 3 days later, and almost none a month later. Writing has much more long-term impact. People will quote back to you things you wrote a decade ago and even not longer. They never mention something you said on television 30 years ago, but they will find something. There's something very durable about the printed word, and nothing we've done to get away from the printed word has had the same durability.
Yeah.
The other thing is when are we advancing for advancement's sake? When I first worked in television in England, it was black and white, and it was already in color in America, and I was very excited to see it. I thought it would have dimensions beyond color. But what I found out, which the movie makers certainly found out, is that you lost a lot, you gained a lot. You can't have a good noir movie in color. It doesn't work. You need the shadows. You need all that atmosphere which comes with black and white. That just doesn't work. Imagine the third man in color, and they try to color it, and they just go boing. They lose all of their mystique, if you will.
Yeah.
So sometimes, because you can do something, I did some work in the theater over many years actually, and I always said, if we can do something that's very difficult in the theater visually, do it. It has huge impact, like the chandelier falling down in Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's very great theater. But if you can project something on a screen, don't bother. It's easy to do, and it's not worth doing. It doesn't add to the production. And I notice with new products, often they're new and seeking a mission, or the mission hasn't been completely refined. I first saw what today is what we're doing today, Zoom or its equivalent, in Finland many years ago, when they were working with, and it was very primitive. You couldn't get a lot of motion. You would get the head moving and the arms wouldn't move, etc. But this was going to do great things and make corporations more efficient. Well, it didn't really, but it's been very useful. I mean, it is now, we wouldn't be having this program if we didn't have it.
Sure.
Last night, I was talking to a very brilliant guy about artificial intelligence who happened to be in Korea at the time. But that wasn't the mission that was originally envisaged. It was in, so I just wonder, do you think yours will evolve? Do you think you'll find totally new missions, maybe in medicine, something like that, maybe in surgery? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely talked about it with where the platform could go. I mean, it's based on a proprietary 3D gaming engine, and so it could be used to create what you're talking about. Different ways to connect. And we're open to that, right? We also want to be careful not just to change on every whim wherever the market takes us, because that's also very expensive when you start pivoting. And so for now, we see a use case, and we're getting bites on people using it for building a community that they already have, or being a place to bring people together that can't be in person in a more effective manner. But doesn't say it couldn't change into something else in the future. One other thing I will mention too is you mentioned print versus listening to a news article or a podcast, whatever. People all learn differently, right? I much am a reader. If I see it, I cognitively can understand it better. Our CEO is very much a visual person, so for her, like, the words don't matter or the spreadsheet. She needs to actually see it in a diagram to kind of really get it in, or see visually what the image is. And so because everyone learns a little bit differently, what we've found within our platform as well is, how do you engage different types of learners in one space? This right now is very hard for neurodivergent learners because we're just talking, right? There's nothing else to look at or do, or to fidget with, or whatever. And so our space kind of also allows us to have a video, a PDF, a downloadable document, something to click on, but all of it is informing the conversation that you're actually having. So you're not multitasking by clicking on something in our space. You're actually just enhancing what you're learning because it's around the topic. So that's something else to think about as people create more of these online spaces, is how do we need to learn is going to be important, for different mindsets. So.
That's very interesting. As a matter of fact, I learn best by listening. I grew up learning and was largely educated by the radio and what was called the BBC transcription service fed into Africa. Although I revere the printed word and it is more durable, I personally learn primarily through my ears. Although I read all the time. I'm a fairly voracious reader. I read slowly, but I read a lot. And this is very interesting. I can see just in this conversation a use where I would find this very satisfactory, and that is if you created a tavern or a club where you could drop in where some of your friends might be, and you could have a chin wag and not quite enjoy a beer together, but go some distance towards that casual intimacy, which is really what our society craves.
Less of the scrolling. more of
Let
a
me
personal
comment on
side.
this. I think what my distinguished colleague is saying, everything contains the seeds of its opposites. So let's just take, for example, when I was a kid, all of the baseball was outside. And then we went to the Astrodome and everybody said, wait a minute, you can't play baseball like this. Now we're back to Wrigley Field, right?
Yeah.
We're back to building the old stadiums. And let's say that in the future, there will be people who have never had a book in their hand. I'm sitting here in my office with books all around me, and every one of them are digital. And I'm going to say this. I think in the future, we're going to have a business where we'll say, come visit this place and read a book by hand. I'm going to say,
Tony, I just want you to know that those books, they look very nice, but you should try reading them.
well,
Yeah.
Llewellyn, I wrote them. So my point is, everything contains, I think, the seeds of its opposite. And you're right, Howard. Like, I'm a musician. I play classical guitar. I started classical guitar, but like Llewellyn, I like to look too, and I learn a lot by just looking and listening, right? Although I played, I started classical guitar. So I think what we're saying is that if you look at, take the line, if you will, of human existence, and look how things contain the seeds of its opposite. I think we'll make a whole lot of money, for example, if somebody reintroduced the Scotch. I mean, playing Scotch hop in the real world. If someone introduced jumping rope to kids in the real world, if someone introduced electric football sets in the real world, if somebody reintroduced playing checkers in the real world, there will be people who have never touched a checker in their hand. It's all online. So I think that what Llewellyn is saying is that as we move forward with new technology, which we always have, whether it's television, whether it's black and white television, and I can tell you this, I had a grandfather who could not watch a baseball team, a game on television. He had to listen to it on radio. He thought it was horrible watching it because he had an imagination of what was happening.
Yeah.
This
So I
is
think-
a very important part about why listening works. And the difference between radio and television informationally is very interesting because when you see it and hear it, it tends to be complete. Ergo, if you watch a television program and you go to bed, you sort of go to bed. You've seen it, it's answered all the questions it raised. If you've listened to radio or read a book, you go to bed with a lot of questions, with a lot of activity in your mind. They are very different learning experiences. And simply because of the commonality that television has audio, it's not the same medium at all.
Yeah.
And people in publishing and broadcasting always go wrong when they think they can adapt the one medium to the other. They are different and must be respected as they are. And
Well, think of
I
it.
think this is true of a lot of things. And
Yeah, so I think the great contribution that you're doing is another way of learning.
Yeah.
It's another way of interacting. That is, and I think that even now people ask me, well, why is Starbucks so full now? Well, Starbucks has gotten so full now, they're gonna start throwing people out who don't buy. They don't go for the tea; they go for their interaction.
Yeah.
I mean,
To be in a
Mhm.
space of community. Because the other thing is,
I mean, it's a
if you think
community. I mean,
about,
the Starbucks in Westlake, where I go, or the Starbucks in
yeah,
Great Hills, everybody just come to just, oh my gosh, real people.
absolutely, I like to take my computer to a coffee shop, not Starbucks, which I don't like, but just to sit there and be working with other people, being part of a community rather than
Yeah.
the isolation of working in greater comfort at home.
Right.
Yeah. You
So
don't
I
always
think,
need to be talking to people in order to feel like you're part of something, right? As
Right.
long as they're next to you or near you and you kind of have that energy, because we feed off of each other, right? Even introverts might say I don't, but at some point you still need some type of human interaction to kind of keep you moving, right? That's why in person is important. And kind of going back to your point about like listening and the different and seeing, if I said like visualize a red car, right, all of us might be, I might have like a red Maserati in my head, but you might be thinking of a red Ford pickup truck for all I know, right? And so when we're able to have an immersive space that shows us what all the color red is it fire engine red, is it burnt orange red, is it the red behind me, right? Like now when we can all see it and we can all see the exact red car I'm talking about, that allows us all to be on the same page and be able to take the next step together and move the conversation forward. And it also allows for a lot of like, you know, less misunderstandings, right? Because when my boss says, hey, go find me a red car, and I bring her the wrong one, she's gonna be like, well, this isn't what I wanted, because she didn't explain it to me, or I couldn't see exactly what I needed. And so those are the type of problems we're trying to solve. And I think the world needs a little bit more of that at times, because we're all thinking we understand what each other means, and we're really off by, 4 or 5 degrees, because our reds are completely different colors. So
Yeah, you know, my biggest case is that coming out of the pandemic, we were there 2 years,
mhm.
and the juniors coming to UT were acting like freshmen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? So I mean, the sum, you know, let's say the sum of 3 years, really, the summation of 3 years experience, if you look at it mathematically, equaled a freshman online. So all of a sudden, it's, well, you know, we've never been to campus before. So we really had 2 freshman classes there. You had the people who were real freshmen, but you couldn't tell the freshmen from the seniors because they were still exploring. You know,
Yeah.
they hadn't been to the union, right? They hadn't been to a live game, and but I think that without the technology, even then of Zoom or whatever you were using, then you would have had a big delay in
Sure.
communication. And what's important is the communication of ideas, and sometimes it's through like the Titanic, it doesn't get there, right? And sometimes it get there, but the human experience, what we know, it's got to be a combination of the flow of ideas and what sociologists call human interaction, and what psychologists say, well, you
Mm,
can just operate as a human being, which distinguishes, if you will, the 2 disciplines. So I think that
yeah.
that what I'm learning is that you're bringing the world online in a different kind of way. It doesn't mean it replaces it, but it
No.
yeah.
By all, yeah. And we're actually seeing right now in the generation Gen Z and Alpha, they're really going back to more of a tactile world anyways. Like they are going back and wanting to like find the old Walkmans that we used to use in like the 2000s, right? Like the things that I grew up as a millennial, doing, like they're now wearing the same fashion, and they're like trying to find old Polaroid cameras, and like they are going back to this more physical world because they have been so inundated with the digital
Mhm.
world, that I think it's an interesting natural progression, that they're like, I need something more tangible in my life. And
I know.
so
Mhm.
Let me
interested to see
ask,
how that cycle is. Go
no,
ahead.
no, let me ask you a few practical questions. How is your business doing? Are you picking up clients? Is it successful as a business?
Yeah, we are. We are doing a lot of pilots for people in order to get them interested, and then we have several that are on annual agreements with us, like a Dell and a YouTube. So we have that large corporate, and then we're also having smaller clients. I know, John, you work with Ingrid Vandervelt, EBW, and Sheconomy. They want to build a community, a global community on our platform as well. And we have some social media people that want their influencers to be on our platform. There's another brand called I Am Social. So we have people very much interested in this concept. We also are in a spot right now in the world where, from the corporate side, everyone's really still crunching their budget. So hoping this year things will open up a little bit more to be able to, utilize more of these type of platforms now that we have the opportunities.
Very interesting. It seemed to me there would be a big possibility in television, where we're very tired of 4, 5, 6 people sitting around a table, which is a very stultifying situation.
Sure.
If they could walk around more and be more casual and more conversational, it's hard to pull off, particularly if you have to, have breaks for advertisements, etc. But television is aching for some new dimension. It
Mm-hmm.
desperately needs a new dimension. It's very stale. It's losing viewers to podcasts, to video games,
Yeah.
because it itself, television as a general enterprise across the channels, has not evolved very much. And it's due for a big leap forward, or at least for some kind of beginning of a new dimension. It comes along occasionally when some new idea is introduced, and that becomes a cliche in time and gets boring and tedious, and etc.
Sure.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
Llewellyn, do we need a Walter Cronkite saying, and that's the way it is? Everybody believed him.
No, we don't. We don't. What that did do was there was a confluence of known information. You had 3 channels. Everybody watched one of them. They all had basically the same news. So that at the water cooler the next day, the metaphorical water cooler, everybody had watched the same show, heard the same news. Now with 1,000 channels and infinite number of podcasts, everybody has different information. So they didn't watch the same comedy last night or the same movie last night. And we therefore are living in very different dimensions with very different perspectives, which is reflected in the political ugliness of the time.
Yeah, I would like to ask the distinguished Andreas, I want to think about the analyze. What kind of data do you guys analyze? I saw on your webpage, I think I remember it was something about analyzing the data to come up with the next action. How do you guys analyze the data that you have?
Yeah, so because we're understanding what people are actually clicking on, so let's say you have a room and you have 5 pieces of content in there. One's a video of, I don't know, something, sports game, one's a PDF. Maybe people only ever actually click on the PDF and look at it, and no one ever watches the video. So what is that telling us at the end, right? How did I format the event or the meeting? Why people didn't click on the video? Was it not interesting enough? Was it, was the content not relevant? Did people not have time, right? And so by understanding the motions and the movements in the back end, it's allowing us to be able to then look at what that actually means and turn that into actionable insights. So maybe the next meeting, we don't put any videos in there and we see that there's a ton more clicking around on the documents. Okay, well, this audience really likes that type of learning versus they're not, interested in the other. And so it's really understanding kind of the human behavior side of it, and being able to then turn that into a better way than to keep building the product and ultimately help the customer. If Dell's trying to sell more computers, then we need to make sure that people have the opportunity to see the computers in the space, but not feel like maybe it's being thrown at their face. It's more of a subtle way, or giving them information, and then we can actually track what that conversion looks like to see if what we're doing is helping them or it's just not moving the needle at all, which it is helping, for the record.
So let me try to understand also. When I think about, again, the digital world where things are heading, right? A lot of us are on TikTok, Instagram, looking for stuff or posting content. And it seems like your world, there is a lot of platforms. There is things like Scoot and Spatial Chat and Sessions and Rattle and Decentraland and Hermes, and Kumo Space and Gather and Hopin, and how do you win? How do you win in this? It seems like it's a daunting challenge.
Yeah, for us, it's really about showing the data and why it works. I think, for some of the other solutions, like we're not trying to be a 3D gaming engine like a metaverse, right? When people were all talking about that, that's not our goal. We're not trying to be meta, with putting on a VR headset and any of that. We're not there yet. And so that takes, a huge chunk of people off the board that we're competing with. When you think about some of the solutions, potentially like a Gather or Kumo Space, we're comparable, but they're really focused on creating a digital twin of your office and what does that in-office work look like. And that's really not what we're about. We can do it, but that's not really our goal. So we kind of take them off the board. Where we're really trying to focus is that engagement side of like when you need people to pay attention, that's when we are the best use case for you. And that could be an internal training with HR. That could be an event, as a community to come and, like I mentioned, your digital roundtable, come online to do that. And that's where we really see like education and learning as really the sector that is where this is needed mostly. And the other ones kind of fall by the wayside. So that's kind of been our focus and where we're seeing the most traction today, to try to stay focused in the sea of other potential solutions. But we don't see a ton that are kind of this 2D sector like what we're focusing on.
Okay. And tell us real quick, Ahna, what's in front of you the next 6 months? What are you paying attention, or are you releasing a new version of the platform, or what's going on?
It's yellow.
What's
It
coming?
looks like you have next one.
Yeah, so what we're really trying to do right now
No, I
is focus on integration of AI and what that could really look like. I mean, we know we already use it for backgrounds and stuff, but you know, how do we take our data to the next level? Because that's really where the proof is in the pudding. And so instead of like manually doing it all in spreadsheets and forms and stuff like that, how can we really take that future forward? And it's not really about new features. I think people get stuck developing like features all the time. People don't need more features. They just need to understand the basic uses. And if we can get more people to understand that, then we'll give them the features they need in the future or turn them on that are already built. Because it's about learning quickly and adopting quickly and not making it feel like it's a really scary place to come to our product. So that's kind of been our focus, and we're probably will see for the next 6 months, and then after that, we'll kind of reevaluate.
Okay. But gentlemen, final thoughts, Johnny.
Well, I think it's obvious that with any kind of technology, you need a measure of effectiveness.
Sure.
That is, if I were to consider this for every classroom at the University of Texas at Austin, for everybody to have on their you'd have to show the effectiveness, and for the business, it's the bottom line. You know, what we've done, especially, I gave a talk at Rice University to some young management professors, and you know, everybody forgot about the bottom line. Everybody talks about the technologies, but they don't talk about is it really helping the firms achieve their objectives, right? Everybody talks about what the firms should do for them and how the firms should make their lives better. But I think if we move into this new technology area like this, if you approach a business enterprise, you need some data which would show, you know, if this enterprise did this and it really increased the productivity of their of their employees. So I think the metrics by which you measure your success would be a good thing to really think about.
The switch was
By the way,
turned off.
512 CMG could really help you do that if you wanted to engage there. But remember, it's all about the metrics, and I do think that people are forgetting about what's the bottom line, and then you look up, and you know, people are being fired. Firms are reorganizing themselves, they're restructuring themselves, and then looking for a way to solve the problems of consumers to make their life better. And if the technologies do not work, much like the Astrodome, which was a fabulous, you know, the 8th wonder of the world, and then we went right back to Wrigley Field, you know, in Chicago, on the Boston White Sox field, which was built in 1912 because it was more effective. So you know, I think that whenever we have a new technology for a firm to use, we have to talk about the metrics of what I would call the bottom line.
100%. Don't disagree at all.
Yeah. Llewellyn, are you still there? You're frozen. I think Llewellyn got a frozen challenge going on. It must be the weather up there. So anyways, Ahna, it's always a pleasure.
I'm sorry, I'm having troubles.
Can you hear us? Yeah, he's frozen. So anyway, I was gonna say, Ahna, it's always a pleasure to have you and to connect with you and visit. We will keep you in the short leash. Keep tracking what's going on with your world. I think it's this virtual world is digital world is fascinating. How it's evolving. Not sure where this is all gonna go, Johnny, but I think there's gonna be a lot of innovation coming that way, and maybe transactions and more usage of all this information. Perhaps the new NVIDIA supercomputer can shed a light into all this. Don't know, but anyway, Llewellyn, you're not gonna make it. We're gonna close out. Ahna, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Johnny, take us away.
Amarillo by morning, up from San Antonio. The only thing that I've got is what I've got on. When that sun is high in the Texas sky, I'll be working at the county fair. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo, I'll be there. One of the favorites.
Woo-hoo. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Take care. Bye,
Thanks,
Llewellyn.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye,
guys.
Anna. Nice seeing you.